And I think at the end of the day, the more you like prolong and wait and push it off to try to like get the skills or figure it out and be perfect in the moment, the more you're just delaying opportunity for whatever the next great thing is.
At Mekanism, we build iconic brands with soul and science. The soul is culturally relevant brand building, and the science is the always-on marketing activities that drive the bottom line. Learn more at Mekanism.com. Spencer Hoddeson is the founder and CEO of the ready-to-drink cocktail brand Gaywater. The term Gaywater is slang for vodka soda within the queer community, and it dates all the way back to the early 1960s. Gaywater as a brand is shaping up to change the seltzer and beverage world. As a member of the queer community, a social media influencer, and having led the brand marketing and corporate social team for Yahoo, Spencer set out to integrate his product within the community rather than trying to build a following around his company. In today's episode, you'll learn how brands can create products that serve an established community rather than trying to build a new community from scratch. And you'll hear why many younger audiences expect brands to be mission and purpose-driven before they become consumers. And you'll learn why connecting and engaging with your audience in organic ways is like rocket fuel for growth. Let's dive right in and learn about the soul and science of community engagement with Spencer. Welcome to the Soul and Science Podcast. We're here with Spencer Hoddeson. What is up, Spencer?
Not too much. How are you doing?
We're doing great here. I was intrigued when we made contact and started looking into your company, Gaywater. So I have a million questions about it, but I want to start by talking about you, Spencer, before we talk about Gaywater. So give me a little background on you.
Yes, I will give you the superhero origin story. I went to Vanderbilt University down in Nashville, and I was always kind of from the school of thought that I loved television and film growing up. I thought I wanted to be in that world. So I actually built a major, like created my own major at Vanderbilt called Entertainment Media Studies that was really focused around sort of curating a course load that would kind of set me up for any sort of career in the entertainment industry. And after school, that's actually what I did. I had interned at a bunch of music companies and magazines and television networks throughout college, and ultimately after school ended up going to NBC and working in the Page program. NBC's like rotational program where you get to see kind of how the television industry like creates content, then markets that content, and then monetizes that content. So you get a really holistic view of sort of how the industry runs.
Did you have to wear a suit every day?
Not every day, but I did have kind of that like iconic Page uniform that Kenneth wears in the TV show 30 Rock.
30 Rock, yeah. I always think of NBC Pages as that outfit with a name tag.
It was really a sort of jack of all trade jobs where you get thrown into crazy random scenarios and really get to learn the industry from sort of the bottom up, which I loved. But I really kind of honed in and focused on the idea that I wasn't as interested in the content side of it, wasn't really as interested in the monetization side, but I loved marketing. I myself kind of love to understand how people tick and understand why people, act a certain way, consume a certain way, do the things that they do. So after the Page program, I actually went on to work at USA and Sci-Fi Networks in the consumer marketing, on the consumer marketing team that kind of straddled both networks, doing like brand marketing, brand activation, stunts, experiences. And after a little while doing that, I kind of realized that as much as I thought I wanted to be in sort of the entertainment space, I realized that the sort of like company culture and the system that's built around the entertainment industry just like wasn't for me. I'm very like strategy innovation focused. And I think, particularly with a lot of like the bigger legacy entertainment companies, they're very um, operationalized, and you know everyone has their role. The role is the same. It doesn't matter, if it's a marketing coordinator, manager, director job, like that person is expected to do the same function that that job kind of delineates, if that makes sense. At some of these bigger companies, it's not as, I would say, fluid as startup culture or even the tech space.
And so you went from there and then you went to Yahoo after that?
I did, yeah. I wanted something where there was a little bit more opportunity to take on, I would say, different like learn and grow. I'm from the school of thought where like the second you hit stagnancy in your career is like the devil. Like that's the point of no return, and you start to get really comfortable and you start to just coast for a really long time. And I'm just kind of like a voracious learner. I always want to be doing something new. I always want to be doing something that challenges me and interests me. So I moved over to Yahoo. I joined the brand team there as, at the time, Verizon had just acquired AOL and Yahoo and kind of put them together to create this new company called Oath, which was really Verizon's sort of B2B brand to go up against kind of the Googles and the trade desks and some of the big ad platforms that are out in the tech space right now. So I joined right as Oath was being formed, got to work on the tail end of that launch campaign, building out that brand and identity. A couple years in, they rebranded to Verizon Media. We did. I was on that team that fully rebranded it to Verizon Media to really, benefit from the equity of Verizon, the parent brand. I think they realized after a lot of extensive research that, building a new brand in the B2B space where you have to explain that this is a house of brands, including AOL, Yahoo, Tumblr.
Any meeting you're spending the first half talking about your structure is not good.
It wasn't even like meetings. Like I spent family events when people were like, "What company do you work at?" I had to be like, "Well, it's called Oath, but it's actually AOL and Yahoo and a you know HuffPost and Tumblr and Brightroll and all of these brands in one." That learning definitely also applied in the beverage space later, where or in CPG in general, where if you're the first to market and you have to do a ton of education around like who and what you are, you're probably not doing it in the right way.
Was that your last job before you started Gaywater?
It was, yeah. I was at Yahoo for about 5 years. At the tail end, I was interim running the brand team and then also running this corporate social team.
After your corporate stint, how did you get the idea? I see a hole in the market. I've got a great product idea. Seltzer space is exploding. I want to be part of that. How did you decide to make that jump?
A couple of things were happening concurrently. The first, over COVID, I had kind of developed my own personal brand across like TikTok and Instagram and formerly Twitter. That really, it was just like lip syncs and memes that catered to the queer community. So I kind of had my own personal brand platform that I had been sort of putting out there. But I had hit a point where,
Hard
um,
suspenders.
yeah, it had gotten to a point where it was like I would really have to dive in and go, not necessarily all in on that, but dig in deeper. And I had just never seen myself being like a creator or influencer. That was just not something that I ever really wanted. That I was finding it was hard to kind of blur the lines between your personal life and sort of the personality or the content creator that you put out there. I was going out to like gay bars and spending like frankly half my night like talking to people who would come up to me and be like, "Oh, I love your TikToks," like, and I'm like, I'm one of those people that I don't know how to end a conversation. I feel like a lot of people are very good at being like, okay, well, like I have to go to another meeting, I have to do this, and I am not. And I was finding that like I would go out and spend like half my night just like chatting with people, which is awesome. I love meeting new people, but it's also you want to go out, you want to dance with your friends and have a good time. And so that was kind of one of the things that was happening concurrently, where I was like, I've started to build this platform. It's mainly rooted in the queer community, but I don't think I want this for me personally. But I think that there's an opportunity to, build something for the community.
That's cool. So you had the idea because you don't like ending conversations. You're like, I'm gonna start Gay Water instead.
Exactly. Exactly. I was like, let me just, instead of ending conversation, I just hand someone a can and walk away.
Yeah, that's great.
So that was happening concurrently to, I loved my time at Yahoo, but I did feel like towards the end, I'd gone through three rebrands at Yahoo. It went from, AOL and Yahoo to Oath, and then Oath to Verizon Media, and then Verizon Media to Yahoo. And I felt like I had kind of hit that precipice where I had done kind of the same thing over and over again, and I was ready for sort of a different challenge to just like learn and grow.
You maybe had an idea percolating. You realized that you were getting some recognition through your content. And you said, what is something that I could create? Because I do have a little bit of a platform now, and maybe I can leverage that platform to create something.
That's definitely part of the driver behind it. I was actually on a trip with a girlfriend of mine, and she was starting at a big beverage company and was sort of in that fun employed stage where you have the job offer and you're starting in a couple weeks, but right now you're between jobs. And we had gotten to this topic of queer representation on our trip in the beverage space because she had been, talking about this new job and was really excited about it, and we had started talking about the beverage space. And so we got to this topic of queer representation, and that was, I would say, like that first conversation that started to plant the seed in my mind of like, from her viewpoint, having worked in the space 10 plus years, there were very few queer people that she worked with, let alone queer products that she saw. It's an industry that's so, heavily dominated by men, mainly white men, mainly middle American, older like demographic. In the last 5 years, there's been a ton of emerging brands that have focused on, being Black owned, women owned, minority owned, but very few brands that are queer owned, and even fewer that are queer focused. And as you can imagine, as I started digging into, the macroeconomics and the research, like it is a community that is so severely underrepresented in the space, yet targeted by big beverage companies and pretty consistently seen as like a growth audience for like established beverages. I think a lot of people, when I had this idea and we weren't in market yet last year, but everything happened with Bud Light, a lot of people kept coming up to me and being like, are you sure you still want to go through this? Like, look what just happened to Bud Light. I kind of had two responses to them. Like, one, you can't really boycott a product that you were never going to buy to begin with, right? I think that's part of where a lot of Bud Light's sort of issues came from, was that it offended a subsect of their current customer base, whereas a product like Gay Water is very much like, you're going to see it, you're going to see the name, and if you're not interested, you're just going to move past and not buy it, or you're going to make a scene and bring attention to it, right? So that was one aspect of it, but the other, I kind of turned to people and said, well, clearly there was a reason that Bud Light marketed to this community. They wanted to market to the queer community because they wanted to like acquire the queer customer for Bud Light, right? Like there has to be some sort of research out there that validates that like this is a growth audience for them, or else they probably wouldn't have done a campaign like that. And as I, post having the idea on this trip, well, I'll backtrack. I mean, we started talking about queer representation in the space, and then I ordered a vodka soda at dinner one night because that's usually what I drink when I go out. I usually stick with a clear liquid, so very simple. I recognized very early on, post being 21, that the second you add kind of like sugary products into the mix, the hangover becomes so much more severe, because it's not only alcohol, it's a sugar hangover. It ends up like all snowballing. So I ordered a vodka soda one night on this trip, and I turned to her and I was like, have you ever heard of this being called Gay Water? And she was like, I don't know if it's that I, went to NYU and I have a ton of gay friends, or I've just like gone out with you, or what it is, but like, yes, I know exactly what Gay Water means. I know that's a term for vodka soda. And I think that was sort of the moment where I was like, okay, straight ally, like, has heard of this, even if it's like just, something she's heard peripherally, like there may be an opportunity to like champion and bring back this word to the mainstream, because gay water has been a term for a vodka soda, dating back to the days of Stonewall. It's like similar to the term like friend of Dorothy. It's been in kind of like the queer canon for a really long time.
And Gay Water has 80 calories and no sugar. So it takes care of the hangover part.
I can't say that, but you can.
I can't. I can say that. And how long from we're having this conversation, ordered your vodka soda, from at that point to the product launch? How long was that time frame?
A little less than a year and a half. I think it was like 14 months.
That's really fast. So then did you quit your job, your full-time job, raise money? Did you bootstrap it? How did you do that piece?
I didn't quit my full time job, which I would recommend to any founder that isn't raising like a big pre seed round. Even if you are raising a big pre seed round, my point of view is that there's a lot of slow moving things that need to happen to kind of at least foundationally establish the business. That there's probably 3 to 6 months of, I wouldn't call it dead time, but like you incorporate your business, you have to get trademarks, you have to like build out a brand identity. Those things, if you're a tech business, like you have to, work with a developer to build out the MVP. Those things are not going to take, 12 hours of your day, right?
No, that's a year. That's a year of work at least, and you can do that as your side hustle until you're ready to launch.
Exactly, which is exactly what I did. I spent about a year kind of moonlighting before leaving Yahoo, and I initially bootstrapped it. So going back to like the content creator side, I had basically, monetized as a content creator, banked all of that money, knowing one day that I would want to use it towards either a business or something later stage in life, like a home. And I ultimately was like, you know what? I feel like it's kind of now or never, which it never is, but I had like rationalized that I don't, have significant attachments at this point. Like, I don't have a partner, I don't have kids. Like, now is as good as any time to kind of, take the plunge.
When I co-founded my company, I did it in that early 30s space before I was had kids and a mortgage, and you're more open to absorbing risk than, later on, and I think that's great advice. And did you end up raising money when you launched, or did you do friends and family to finance it? Or
I bootstrapped it, and then I did a small like friends and family sort of pre-seed round. I would say that got us like just through launch. We had a big launch last July. We were really fortunate enough to be featured in CNN, and we were trending on CNN.com for a bit, and we got a ton of press. And
yeah, you got a ton of coverage. The name helped.
yeah, the name helped. I think CNN kind of went the angle of this is the anti Bud Light, and we didn't set out to, but kind of capitalized on the fact that there was still a news cycle happening around what was going on with Bud Light. Um, and yeah, so we had a great launch. We had some good momentum, and coming out of launch, I would say starting in like October, we started fundraising. We had like locked a committed investor at that point to lead our round. Some things ended up happening a couple months later, and we actually, they're still involved, but not as involved. So we're actually still fundraising right now. We are still sort of in this hybrid of like bootstrapping and a little bit of our pre-seed round, hopefully closing our round in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, fundraising, I would say for CPG right now is the hardest it's ever been. I mean, I'm a first time founder, first time fundraising. So, like, take it as a grain of salt coming from me. But I've had so many conversations with like very seasoned investors and heads of funds who are like, it's unprecedented. Like, we've never seen capital raises being this difficult in the last like 10, 20 years. So,
Very hard, and borrowing money is very expensive right now. So it's a lot of different factors. Is your goal to be in, D2C and retail, like to do both?
yeah, I think in beverage, particularly bev alc, D2C is never going to be like a main revenue stream, right? I think across the industry, it's about 3.5% of a company's revenue in the bev alc space would be direct to consumer, which is unfortunate because our brand is pretty far reaching, right? Like there's queer people in every state, and the three-tier system in alcohol makes it pretty difficult to enter new markets without having a ton of capital and being able to like really pound the pavement in those markets. But that being said, I mean, early on, like we were doing really really well D2C. We had like the biggest launch our third party retailer had ever seen, online retailer, which was really cool to hear. But I would say in the bev alc space, I mean, just there's a couple things that make it really difficult. One is shipping, and not. I think people immediately think alcohol, it's cans, it's heavy, like that's what drives up shipping costs, which it absolutely does. Um, but alcohol also requires signature upon delivery. They have to show ID, so someone has to be home, in addition to the signature. So those like additional check boxes even make the cost more difficult. And I think that most consumers think of direct to consumer for alcohol as like Uber Eats or formerly Drizzly, getting it delivered to their house. But even that is still the three-tier system. You're actually going through a retail, like a local retailer, to get it distributed.
What would you say the hardest thing is right now, being less than a year old, with a pretty successful launch, a very targeted audience, which is great? What is the hardest part right now for the company?
I mean, fundraising has been quite a challenge. I think contextualizing to investors and folks who might not be a part of the community or have like a close family member or friend in the community, like contextualizing that the LGBTQ community isn't like a niche audience, I think is an interesting challenge. Like there are more queer people than Asian Americans in the country, in the US. Like there are more queer people than Mormons, Jews, and Muslims combined in the US. Like
That's amazing.
it is one of the fastest growing communities, which sounds weird to say in this country. It's doubled in size in the last 10 years. It continues to grow. Like every generation for the last four generations, the queer community has doubled in size. But that being said, I think contextualizing that to folks who may not be comfortable investing in something that they don't understand, that always ends up being a challenge. The same goes to, I would say, the second answer to that question is also like coming out of what happened with Bud Light and more recently, like Target pulling back their Pride collection, knowing that there is sort of a vocal minority of folks who will create a ruckus around seeing sort of queer products out in market. We've definitely had challenges with retailers, behind the scenes, basically saying like, "Sorry, I can't have another Bud Light on our hands." So that also is unfortunate because those retailers also have you know diversity, equity, and inclusion pages up on their website where they say they support the queer community, and then they say things like that behind the scenes. So
That's the hardest thing where you're at right now. What's something that's going, better than you expected right now for the company?
sales have been pretty great for the stage that we're in and the sort of resources that we have available. Still, waiting for fundraising to come through. We actually sold out product in New York, which is unfortunate because New York Pride is this coming weekend, which should be a big moment for us. So that's I guess going well, but also could be going better. I would say if we had inventory in stock. Um, The brand itself, I mean, we've spent next to $0 in paid marketing. And the brand itself has kind of just taken off, which I would think adds fuel to the fire to some investors' conversations. Like knowing how much money other brands are spending on marketing to build their brand in most cases, and not to like rag on other brands like unsuccessfully. Um, I mean, I've seen brands spend, you know, 80K in a single campaign and get a couple thousand followers that aren't, loyal followers and like engaged audience members. Because I think a lot of beverage brands particularly have this school of thought of I'm going to create the best product and then I'm going to figure out who is going to drink this product.
Most companies are looking at how to expand their audience versus you're creating it for the audience. And so you have a very different perspective and you're a member of the community that you're, selling to. So you have an advantage there.
Yeah, but even broader, I mean, when you take a step back too on beverage, CPG in general, like we're not solely targeting the queer community. It's like we got a comment the other day on some social platform that was like, can only gay people drink gay water? And I responded and I was like, can only Italian people eat Italian food? The idea behind it is, we're building we're building a mission driven brand that our mission is really to create representation on shelves for this community that's so underrepresented in grocery stores, liquor stores, bars, restaurants, concert venues, event space, like places where queer people both like work and shop, right? And maybe aside from like an employee resource group that acts behind the scenes, there's really nothing like out there for that community providing that feeling of comfort and kind of like safeness on the shelves. But all that to say, the idea is even when you take a step back and look at like beverage and CPG broadly, like a lot of the competitor brands or other brands out there, like don't really stand for anything, right? Most of the brands out there are cash grab, right? Like there's a distillery or a big beverage company that just wants to make money. And their brands don't really have meaning. There's a big hard seltzer brand that I'm sure we all can think of, and their logo is a wave, and it's like I've never thought of it as a surfing brand. I've never thought of it as like a beach brand, right? What does the brand stand for out in the world? Do they donate to anyone? Do they work with any nonprofits? Like I've never heard of most of these brands like working with nonprofits or really standing for anything out there. And I think as you look at like Gen Z who are so mission and purpose driven in the way that they consume, they really look to support companies that are supporting things that they care about. I think we're going to start to see like a broader shift in CPG in general for brands to really support something bigger than themselves, right?
Of course. And it's good business to do that.
As a founder in this space, I mean, there's a ton of products that have launched in the last year. And I always look, I read the press releases and I want to see what the story is behind the brand. And oftentimes, like, there really isn't a story. Or the story is very see-through and it's like, I'm making this brand because I see the market growing and I want to just like make money. One of the biggest celebrities in the world launched a vodka soda brand a couple months ago. And if you read the press release, it was like, I wanted to make the best vodka soda that me and my friends could enjoy. That was like pretty much verbatim what the press release says. Like there's no like real story behind it. There's no mission behind it. And
That's terrible. You got to start with a story. It all starts with a story. So let me ask you a question on tone. First of all, your design is it stands out. It's fun. It's very lively. It immediately would pop off the shelf. Some of your copy has a real wink to it. Come in, we're open. We want to be in and around your mouth. Visually and language wise, you have a tone and a voice, which I think is great. I mean, you really do have a vibe and a feeling for the product. How did you land on that is the right tone? Was there any insight or testing involved, or was it more of, I know it's going to resonate and I'm going to go with my gut?
A bit of a mix. I mean, I would say to any founder, like the organic algorithms like are your friend. The algorithms have gotten so good that like we launched a product with basically no marketing spend, because the algorithm will organically find the people that will be interested in this product. But I would say best advice I can give is like trial and error, test and learn. Like I think the early, like the 2000s and the 2010s, I would say the 2000s were about like building social media as a one-way marketing platform, right? Like brands really only leveraged in the 2000s their social media to talk at consumers. And in the 2010s, you started to see like more conversation and more brands recognizing that it's not about talking at people, it's about talking with people. And I think now what we're starting to see is like going even deeper. And that's what I'm trying to do with sort of the tonality of the brand is like we understand our customers and where they are and what they're doing, and we're not trying to be just like another beverage brand that's like picture of product at the beach, picture of product in the mountains, picture of like our cooler with product sitting on top of it. We're really focused on building a community driven brand, a brand that like resonates and sits with the community. So I always like to say, like, if someone writes a comment at us, like, can only gay people drink gay water? Like, if you bark at us, we're going to bite back. Like, this is a living, breathing brand. Like, we're trying to personify something, that, an intangible product and build a community around it. You have to act and be like the community that organically want to fit in with.
Yeah. Act and be like the community. I like that. And so you're a first time founder, you're starting an edgy brand. It's doing well, really well. What are you really proud of yourself as a first time founder that you think you're really good at?
I'm definitely a brand builder. What makes me tick is understanding how people think. And I kind of approach the business in that way. I think a lot of founders are really ego driven. And it's like, I want to create the best skincare brand that like me and everyone I know would use, right? And I think in that line of thought, like you're completely missing the point, right? Like sometimes that is going to be really successful, but I think most times when you lead with this is something that is for me and my world, you're missing out on so much, like a plethora of diverse perspective and honestly broader stroke that you can take and hit a broader community. So we really created a great product. Like it's a great tasting product. We at the end of last year won, BevNet's best RTD cocktail, which is like BevNet's the biggest trade publication in the beverage space. So like the product itself is great. Like it's three ingredients: it's vodka, soda water, and fruit extract from the different fruit flavors that we have. We're not reinventing the wheel product wise yet in terms of like throwing chili peppers in a vodka soda, right? Or creating a vodka soda that has some crazy health benefit, which to be honest, you're never going to be able to have any health claims in alcohol. There's way too many regulations around it. So we created a great product, but I think where I've personally been able to help the brand grow and succeed is building the brand and building a community around it rather than just building a product and kind of then trying to find, who our audience is. I think as someone who has a brand background, I recognize that like you can always go broader, but you can't necessarily go narrower, right? Like you can't launch a product and then drill down to a community that you haven't been talking to yet. I kind of wanted to create a product that's inherently speaks to a community, but you can always build beyond that community. And that's what I kind of see for the brand in 2 to 5 years is like it becomes a mainstay in the queer community. And then there's a bigger halo effect to allies, parents, supporters of the community who see that we're building a product that goes beyond just what all the other products on market stand for, right? Like it's not owned by a big beverage company or a distiller. It's a smaller queer owned business that exists to create representation for the queer community.
Do you enjoy what you're doing?
I do. Um, it's gotten, I will say, like, as time goes on, it gets harder and harder and harder. Um, I think there's a founder mentality of always like, if I just get to this next like checkpoint, like things will start to like the stress will start to ease, or
That never happens.
it never
It
happens.
never happens. Also, that's just like life. You know, you always think if I get to this milestone, everything's going to be hunky dory. Are you taking time to, appreciate the wins and be on the journey?
I'm trying to. I've started to like take gratitude each week and just like recognize how far we've come. I definitely try to celebrate the wins. As like a sole founder, it gets difficult to do that because it's always okay, on to the next thing. Like, well, we got into this retailer, like we got to finish the conversation with that retailer. There's always something else and something bigger and better, but I definitely try to take those moments of gratitude. It doesn't always happen, but
I love that. Do you have a mantra or a quote that you think about as like a guiding voice for you?
not like a specific mantra or quote. I am just the type of person that's like course correct, problem solve, move on. I think that the second you start to like dawdle and look back on what you could have done better or how you could have handled something differently, I think it's important to look back sometimes and pull out the nuggets of like what's important from those kind of like tough situations. But I think that the biggest thing that can break down is you, and it's always in a moment where something goes wrong that you're trying to think of how it could have not gone wrong rather than moving forward and figuring out how to course correct and fix what did go wrong. That is like the number one piece of advice I give to every founder is like there will be time later to reflect and look back on how we got to where we are, right? But if you sit and wallow in that moment, nothing good is coming from that. And you might miss the opportunity to actually fix it and move on. So I'm just from the school of thought of like problem solve and course correct. There's always going to be curveballs. You're always going to make mistakes. Like no one is perfect. I've always been the type of person that like not necessarily a perfectionist, but I don't want to go into a situation not knowing all the details or not being able to do it to the best of my abilities. And I think at the end of the day, the more you the more you like prolong and wait and push it off to try to like get the skills or figure it out and be perfect in the moment, the more you're just delaying opportunity for whatever the next great thing is.
All right, we're gonna move on. I've sort of a way we wrap up these podcasts where we talk about an inspiration that you've had recently, maybe a lesson that you've learned recently, and then we dare the audience to try a new tactic or strategy. So I'll start while you think of what yours might be. But one lesson for me that I recently learned was remembering to reheat a cold connection. So a former colleague or mentor or mentee or someone that you haven't spoken to in a while. I caught up with someone recently and found it really invigorating to really support each other's goals in our career and how we're moving forward. And it just reminded me like we let relationships drop sometimes, but you got to make the effort in your busy day, especially as a new founder, to really go back and don't let those connections drop just because you're busy. Try to work that into your day, some into your routine somehow, because it really can be really inspiring when you do that. Do you have a lesson that you would want to share with our audience?
I know this can be hard, but like disrupt your routine. Like walk down a different street than you would walk down on your commute to work. Like I literally did that the other day and ran into someone I haven't seen in 10 years. And similar to like reheat your connection, we ended up chatting for 20 minutes and that person actually had like a lead for me for something business wise. So
If you didn't take the different path, you never would have run
I
into that.
never would have ran into that person. We weren't following each other on social media anymore. It's not like I knew what was going on in that person's life. So it's as easy as like everyone who commutes to work, like drive down a different street, walk down a different path. It's worth the extra like couple minutes to just like see what else is going on out there, right? Like look at you go down a different path, you see a different advertisement, which could be for a delivery service that inspires you to like think a different way in whatever you're doing at work. It's really as simple as just walk down a different street.
That's good. So something that's inspiring you or something that you saw that you really dug recently. So one thing for me was Orida, which you would never think about. They make tater tots. they did. They celebrated the 20th anniversary of Napoleon Dynamite this week, and they came out with, I don't know if you remember that movie, but yeah, he always had tater tots in his pocket. And so they created a pair of pants to protect your tater tots. It's like got tater tot pockets to keep your tater tots nice and warm. And I thought it means like a small thing. They're like $20 pants. They're just novelty. But I love the idea of reimagining something that was in pop culture and celebrating the anniversary and then coming out with a product. I thought it was really clever and funny. And you would think trying to get an idea like that through a traditional brand would be hard, but they're having fun with it. So I thought that was kind of cool. Anything out there that's you've seen recently that's been inspiring?
I mean, there have been a ton of collaborations. This was like a couple months ago, the Manischewitz rebrand.
Oh yeah, that was really good.
It was just great, and it's like a such a legacy brand that whether you've bought like Jewish food or just seen the brand on shelves, I think they took it in like a really fun and playful way, um, and modernized the brand and brought like a really fun, young, playful approach to it. I love when brands actually rebrand and like actually rebrand, not just, you know, slightly change the logo and introduce a new logo. I think having gone through so many rebrands, like as I mentioned earlier, like it is such a big lift for a brand to rebrand. And if the payoff isn't outsized, like why are you even bothering?
Like no one will notice except the group that works internally at the company. You know what I mean?
And people like creatives in the industry, and it becomes more of a trade story than a consumer story. If a rebrand doesn't add value to like the consumers lives, like it doesn't interest them or excite them, you're doing it for yourself, right? You're doing it because there's someone at the company that either wants to like leave their mark, um, or there are employees who don't have enough work to do and suggest a rebrand, and that's the way to stay busy. It felt like the Manischewitz one was like very, very intentional, and they had something to say rather than it was more internal or trade focused.
Yeah, that's good. Good example. All right, last one is double dog dare, something you're going to dare our audience to do, a new tactic or strategy. Mine is I spent a little time in Toronto with client, and it was great. It was a lot of in-person relationship building, and it's a lot of times it's just easier and we get lazy and we don't want to like spend that in-person relationship building time. Not we just want to talk about work, 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 get to the work, have a virtual call and be done. But that in-person relationship building, I dare people out there to try to fight the urge to be lazy and make that extra effort because you might get outsized impact by doing that.
Totally agree. And I say that as someone, I have two events that I have to go to tonight, both like work related, that I'm part of me is dreading, but to your point, I mean, dreading more that I, as a solo founder, I have to go to all of these events alone, and like after a full work day, and part of me is dreading, but also hearing that from your end, like I know every time I go to an event, like I make some sort of meaningful connection that helps either both like from business perspective or personally. So I would completely agree with that I think we are so conditioned post COVID to the easier thing is just not to go. And pre COVID, it was always just these types of things were just built into our routine. And now it's a lot harder to, if you're not going to an office, like get out of your house or apartment and just like make the connections. I mean, aside from my challenge earlier to like take a different path or go down a different street, and aside from buying our product, I would dare everyone to do that.
Well, that could be it. The dare could be to support Gaywater and try it.
I would honestly challenge folks to look at the brands that they're buying and see if there is a comparable brand out there that's doing something uh, for a community or for like an underrepresented group. Because oftentimes, like, there is another option out there, and it's not going to be that much of a sacrifice to really go out of your way to not, feed a multi-million, if not billion-dollar corporation's bottom line rather than like a small business that unfortunately it always ends up being the small businesses that are trying to give back, and build that into their DNA. And it's always the larger companies that just end up throwing money at something rather than have it built into their company.
It's so true. So you're daring people to try your product or other mission driven products where it's built into the company. It's not a afterthought.
100%, because those businesses are the ones that are struggling to build their company with limited resources and are still prioritizing like underrepresented communities.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I really believe in your product and your mission and you as an entrepreneur. And I can't wait to see your journey and where you go from here, because it's going to be exciting and you've got a great start.
Thank you. It's been an amazing journey, and hopefully will continue to be an amazing journey for years to come. So.
Soul and Science is a Mekanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.